Hello readers, and welcome to the next installment of my unboxing reading jargon series. Today we're going to be getting straight to it because I don't know about you, but I didn't actually know the difference between YA, young adult, and adult fantasy until now. Because of course I've done the research, so in today's video I'm going to break down the real differences between YA and adult fantasy. But before I get into all of those, you let me know in the comments whether you prefer YA or adult fantasy, or if you like a bit of both, like me. Now it's worth saying before I get into this video that the things I'm going to mention on their own don't make a book YA or adult fantasy. They may be a combination of some of these things or none of them at all. So with that in mind, here's the first. Okay, starting with perhaps the most obvious, and that's the age of the protagonist or main characters. In most YA fantasy, the main character is usually between the ages of 15 and 19. Younger than 15 and it's likely but not necessarily a middle grade book. Older than 19 and we're veering into adult fantasy territory. The point of YA in general is to tell the story of teen lives, so it's no surprise really that most of the main characters within YA novels are in their teens. However, just because adult novels usually tell the stories of main characters over the age of 19 doesn't mean it's always the case. There are many adult fantasy novels that tell the story of younger characters, but usually they're done from the perspective of an older and wiser character. Take The Secret History for an example. While not fantasy, it tells the story of a bunch of 20-year-olds while they're at college, and it's told by one of those characters as they're older and they're narrating on past events. The Farseer trilogy by Robin Hood does a similar technique. It is told by one of the main characters, Fitz, as he's much older, maybe like 35 or so, and he recounts all of his childhood growing up from the ages of about 6 to 16. If an adult novel uses this technique, it puts the story in past tense, putting a distance between the reader and the story and making it more relatable to older readers who reflect on their younger selves. The novel can then include things within it that talk about the adult present. For YA though, the story is more about the here and now. Whatever is happening to the young protagonist is immediate, and the reader feels connected to it. Therefore, a younger reader can relate to it. For young adult readers, they might not appreciate an older narrator judging and passing comment on things that they did in the past, because everything they're experiencing is happening right now and they're feeling it right now. Young readers are typically told that their experiences and emotions are immature and perhaps short-lived. To have all of these appear in a young adult novel makes them feel seen and appreciated. And even if you're not a young adult reader, seeing things that happened in a younger character's life can be a really enjoyable experience. It's something you may not have had when you were that age. Okay, so the second difference between young adult and adult novels is their voice or style. No matter if it's young adult or adult fiction, most of the time these books are written by adult writers. But if it's young adult, then a good author will write in a young adult's tone and style of voice. What I mean by this is that a young adult novel will typically contain the priorities, worries, and motivations of a younger person. It goes without saying that as you get older, your priorities and worries change. So there's a difference between the priorities of a young person or teen in comparison to those of an adult, which reflects in the books, YA and adult fantasy. Let me give you a few examples. In a young adult novel, you're likely to get more themes of friendship, family, self-discovery, identity, sexuality, and romance, simply because when you were or are a teen, those are big priorities or motivations in your life. An adult novel, though, may focus on themes of tradition versus change, the individual versus society, people versus nature, betrayal, looking back on the past, and more. Of course, there's a crossover for both, but young adult in general has a pretty substantial and reliable set of themes to pull from. But let's go into a little more detail because next we have the themes of the story. Generally speaking, most people think that YA books in general don't have hard-hitting or complicated topics, or some topics are just simply off-limit to YA books, which isn't the case at all. I mentioned some really basic themes in my last point, but this doesn't mean that YA doesn't tackle some really emotional, hard-hitting, or thought-provoking topics. In fact, from experience, the young adult books I've read to date have all tackled more challenging themes than adult ones have. The difference is the way these themes are explored. While both YA and adult fantasy can both tackle the same topics, for example violence, the difference is how. A young adult novel may explore this in less graphic and explicit detail, and the characters' reactions to the violence may be a bit different, but it doesn't mean that YA novels don't explore violence in general, it just means that it's a little bit more tame than it would be in an adult novel. YA is a balance. It's enough to keep the readers on the edge of their seats, but not enough to make them so uncomfortable from the details. Adult novels, however, can be graphic and detailed and kind of messy because the reader is able to take what they want from the novel. Which brings me on to my next point. The suggestibility of the reader. YA novels have limits to what they can contain simply because of the target age of their readers. Of course, this doesn't mean that all YA readers are actually young adults, but if they're tailored towards a younger audience, then the themes within the book need to be tailored towards a group of people who may be slightly more suggestible. Young adults are at a stage in their lives where they're exploring who they are. For this reason, young adult books have to take this into consideration and be careful with the themes within the book. Younger readers aren't 100% suggestible, but when I was a teen, there were plenty of things I read and was influenced by that have stuck with me to this day. Young adult books, therefore, should aim to positively influence their readers as much as possible. This could include anything from teaching them more about themselves, the world, the people in it, etc. It doesn't have to be sunshine and rainbows, far from it, but it should have a positive influence. As an adult reader reading a young adult novel, I can take and pick different themes as I want and take them on or not, because my sense of self is a little bit more well-rounded. But as a younger reader reading the same thing, it might have a lasting impact. The difference between young adult and adult fantasy may have surprised you or not, but if you want to see some other reasons why YA fantasy is awesome, click on the video below. And I'll see you next time.